Have you ever had that gut feeling that something isn't right? Like, you can't quite put your finger on it, but you know danger is near. Almost like when you can sense a thunderstorm is coming, but there isn't a cloud in the sky. I want you to listen to this. When I was 15 and trying to earn extra cash on the weekends, I would end up dog sitting. I'd dog sit for my neighbors, my family, and anyone who paid me honestly. Well, one weekend, I was asked by this family, the Carsons, to dog sit their husky, Tito. Now, one thing you should know about the Carsons, they're rich. I'm talking Porsche in the driveway and a 6-bathroom house rich. So when Mr. Carson asked me to watch their dog Tito for the weekend, I immediately said yes, knowing the pay and the tip were going to be great. The Carsons were going to be gone till Sunday afternoon. They gave me the list of instructions for Tito and $50 for dinner money on account that I would be spending the nights there because they did not want Tito to be left alone. I guess the story really starts that Friday night, the first Friday I was staying at the Carsons. By all accounts, Tito was a great dog. He listened, didn't bark like a maniac, and liked to cuddle. Pretty easy money if you ask me. Well, Friday night, that's when things absolutely took a turn for the worse. I had just gotten back inside the Carsons' house from taking Tito on his final walk before bedtime when it started to thunder and lightning. I remember thinking that I was lucky that I just finished the last walk for the night, otherwise I'd be soaked to the bone. Anyway, after I gave Tito a treat for being a good boy, I put him in his cage in the kitchen per the instructions Mr. Carson had left me. After I made sure the cage was locked and secured, I said goodnight to the pup and headed for the living room. I want to say around midnight is when I started to doze off. The Carsons had a giant 80-inch TV in their living room, and I took full advantage of watching a horror movie on AMC. That and the fact that there was a raging thunderstorm outside was what lulled me to a gentle sleep. And at 2 a.m. I woke up. You know when you have that feeling that something isn't right? Like, have you ever seen Final Destination? The main character had a premonition that the plane was going to blow up and didn't want to get on. Well, that's what I was feeling at that moment. Something wasn't right. It was pretty dark in the house because I had turned off most of the lights before laying down on the couch. I walked over to the front windows and looked outside. It was still raining cats and dogs. I looked around the living room. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary or tampered with. That's when I decided to go check on Tito. As I was making my way over to the kitchen, that's when I noticed it. Leading directly from the front door, which was shut, into the kitchen, were wet footprints. I knew at this point that I had two options. I could panic and possibly get myself killed by whosever footprints those belonged to, or I could stay calm and stay logical. Logic was telling me that they could have been my footprints from earlier, but then I remembered it wasn't raining when Tito and I came back from his final walk, and secondly, the footprints were fresh, as if whoever they belonged to had just made them minutes ago. I decided, against my better judgment, to follow them. As I reached the threshold of the kitchen, I could hear scuffling and whimpering pleas. It sounded like Tito was upset. I fished around for the light switch and flicked it on. I could not believe my eyes. Tito was out of his cage, his mouth duct taped shut and his paws tied together by a man in a drenched raincoat. There was a large, open duffel bag, and the man in the raincoat was trying to shove Tito into it. But the shock of me turning on the lights caused the man to spin around and see me standing there at the edge of the kitchen. I quickly grabbed a kitchen knife from the knife block set that was near me. I held the knife out, my hand shaking, and told the man to get the fuck away from the dog. I couldn't quite see the man's face because his raincoat hood covered the majority of it, but the man put his hands up and slowly stepped away. I was reaching into my pocket for my cell phone to dial 911, and when the man noticed what I was doing, he darted past me, through the living room, and to the front door. I followed behind him and watched as the man sprinted into the pouring rain to a white van parked across the street. He started the van and peeled off. I locked the front door, called 911, and started to cut the rope and duct tape off of Tito. When the police arrived, they informed me that the Carsons have security cameras all over their property, and they were able to ID the license plate that the van the man was driving. Now listen to this crazy part. The man who broke in was a man by the name of Kevin Shewood. Kevin was an ex-employee of Mr. Carson. Kevin believed that he was unjustly fired and decided to enact revenge upon the Carsons by breaking into their house, stealing their dog, and holding him for ransom. Unfortunately, Kevin did not expect me to be there dog sitting that night, which thwarted his plans. I think he ended up doing 4 years in prison for breaking and entering and attempted kidnapping of an animal. When Mr. Carson learned that the kidnapping was prevented because of me, he gave me the biggest tip that even to this day I have ever received. And I guess the moral of the story is, when you get that gut feeling that something isn't right, listen to it. It's that primal instinct we've been given to survive on this planet. Use it and be safe. Have you ever been young, dumb, and in love? Or better yet, have you ever been young, dumb, in love, and hunted by a psycho? If you haven't been the latter, then listen to this. Back in 2021, my parents had gone away for the weekend on account of their 18th wedding anniversary. I was an only child, male, and 17 at the time. My parents told me to take care of the house while they were gone, and to not have any friends over whatsoever. Now, me being young and dumb, I told them I wouldn't have anyone over. But the second they pulled out of the driveway, I was on the phone with my girlfriend and told her to come over for the weekend. My girlfriend and I like to smoke the devil's lettuce, or AKA weed. When she came over that night around 6 p.m., the first thing we did was roll a joint in my living room and then head out back to my woods to smoke. And for geographical context, we lived in a pretty rural area. Woods and rolling hills were all my backyard consisted of, and our nearest neighbors were a good half-mile away. Anyway, back to the story. We had gone a few paces into the woods and sparked up. We were leaning against tall trees, enjoying the scenery. A few raindrops plopped onto my head. I looked up and noticed there was going to be a thunderstorm within the hour. I was telling this to my girlfriend when she hushed me. She was looking out into the vastness of the woods, tilting her head and squinting her eyes. I asked her what's up, and she said she thought she saw someone watching us. I laughed at this because, again, we live in a pretty rural area, and we don't often see our neighbors, especially in the middle of the woods when it's about to downpour. I told her the weed was getting to her head and told her to come on, let's head back inside before we get soaked. And I was right. By the time we got back into my house, there were huge crashes of thunder, and the rain had started pounding on the house. We both decided to get into more comfortable clothes for the night and to watch a scary movie, and I think we chose Poltergeist. Maybe halfway into the movie, my girlfriend got up to get a glass of water from the kitchen, which faces our backyard woods. I heard her pouring herself a glass of water when she started to scream. I sprinted into the kitchen, alert, and asked her what's wrong. She was standing by the big back window, pointing outside. She said she saw the same person from earlier, standing right in front of the window looking in. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this time I was a little nervous, because it was just the two of us in our secluded house in the middle of a thunderstorm. I looked out the window and scanned the backyard. It was hard to see on account of the gusting wind and slanting rain, but still, I didn't see anything. I reassured her that the house is locked. There is no way someone can get in, and that maybe she's still pretty high from earlier and just seeing things. My girlfriend did not seem too convinced on my reasoning, but was willing to go back into the living room and finish the movie. But we both couldn't even finish the movie because of how exhausted we were, and both fell asleep within 20 minutes of being back on the couch. I don't know how much later on in the night, but it had to have been many hours. I remember I suddenly woke up. The TV was still on, and my girlfriend was fast asleep next to me. And it wasn't the TV or my girlfriend's light snores that woke me up. It was the jiggling noise. And I got up and looked out my living room windows, and it was still raining and storming as hard as ever. Maybe it was just the pounding of the rain that woke me up. And I was willing to believe that until I glanced over to my front door and saw the handle jiggling left and right. And I stared in horror, and my only thought was that someone is trying to come into my house. And I went back to the living room window and looked out, trying to see if I could see anyone at the front door. And just then, a flash of lightning erupted in the sky, lighting up the area. And there, standing at my front door, trying to pick the lock, was a man. And that's when I heard a click, and my front door started to slowly open. And I did the only thing that came to mind. I screamed like a maniac that I have a gun, and that I'll blow the brains out if they step inside. And the door continued to slowly open, letting the rain in and getting everything wet. And I cautiously went to the door and peeked out. I could see the man now running down my driveway into the night and disappearing into the woods. And I slammed my door, relocked it, and put chairs and desks in front of it for extra protection. By the time my girlfriend had woken up due to my screaming, I was already on the phone with 911. When the police officer came out, which took about a half an hour, he shed some interesting news upon us. The officer said that there was a string of break-ins in the past couple of days in the area. They haven't caught the person who did it yet, but our break-in fits the same MO. The suspect is picking people's front doors and robbing them. When I finished making my statement and the officer finally left, I profusely apologized to my girlfriend for not believing her. She was right. There was a man this whole time out there stalking us and waiting to break in. And since I was under the age of 18, my parents needed to be called, and they found out that I had my girlfriend over when I told them I wouldn't have anyone. I think me nearly getting robbed and defending the house allowed them not to be as upset with me, which was nice. Also, I don't think that guy was ever caught, or at least was never brought to my attention. But yeah, that's my story of being young, dumb, in love, and almost robbed. Kids have the wildest imaginations, right? They say there's a monster under the bed when, in reality, it's just an old pair of sneakers. But what happens when a child sees something and it's not their imagination? You're about to find out. Listen to this. A few years back, when I was home from college during the summer, I would babysit on the side for extra cash. And for context, I was a 23-year-old female at the time of the story. Anyway, I was babysitting these two kids, Corey and Chelsea. They lived in the neighborhood next to mine, so it was an easy drive. Their parents were gone for the weekend, and I was going to be spending the night at their place, playing games, feeding them dinner, and tucking them into bed. These kids were well behaved and never gave me any issues, which, for a babysitter, is a dream come true. Around 9 p.m., after we had played some Mario Party on the Nintendo Switch, I was beginning to put the kids into bed when it started to thunder and lightning. It was raining so hard that I was reminded of that corny saying, "It's raining cats and dogs." The kids, however, who were only 7 years old, their faces were terrified of the flashing lightning outside their bedroom window. I calmly reassured them that it's just a storm, and they are natural and actually good for the earth. After a few more minutes of me calming down their anxieties, I told them that if they need anything or got scared, that I'll be downstairs in the living room. This seemed to calm the kids down, so I closed their door and said goodnight. A half an hour had passed since I put the kids to bed, and I was downstairs in the living room watching a Netflix documentary. The rain was pounding harder than ever outside when little Corey came into the room, holding his blanket and looking terrified. I paused the show, got up, and bent down to his level and asked him what's wrong. With wide eyes, he told me the boogeyman is outside his window. I reassured him that there's no boogeyman outside his window. It was just the thunder and lightning playing tricks on him, and that there's nothing to worry about. I told him he needs to go back upstairs and be a strong and brave brother to Chelsea. I told him again that I'll be down here if he needs me, and that I would not let anything happen to them. Corey nodded his head reluctantly and went back upstairs. At this point, I did feel a little bad for dismissing his concerns. I could remember being their age and believing every shadow at night was a monster, especially during a thunderstorm. 10 minutes passed. I was back to watching my documentary when, again, Corey came back into the living room. This time his eyes bloodshot and tears coming down his face. I hurried over to him, rubbing his shoulders and asking what's wrong. He said the boogeyman is outside their window. This time, in order to truly calm down his fears, I knew I needed to go upstairs and prove there was no boogeyman. I took his hand and we climbed the stairs. When we got to the bedroom in which the children shared, I saw Chelsea curled up in her blankets, shaking on her bed. I entered the room, reassuring her that I'm here and nothing bad is going to happen. It's just a thunderstorm outside, that's all. As I was trying to calm down Chelsea, Corey pulled me over to his bedroom window and pointed outside. There was a massive tree right outside their window. Corey said to look at the branches. I had to squint because of the pouring rain. I was about to tell them the branches can look scary during a storm when a huge flash of lightning erupted in the sky. With the area briefly lit up, I was able to see clearly into the tree. Crouched down on the top branch, closest to their bedroom window, was a man. He was shirtless, he was unblinking, and he had the widest smile that I've ever seen. When we locked eyes, he pointed at me. Corey and Chelsea both began to cry, both seeing the man as well. I had to blink hard, because this could not be happening. But when I opened my eyes back up, the man was still crouched in the tree, still unblinking, and still smiling. I immediately ran downstairs and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. I sprinted back up the stairs, grabbed the kids, and locked them in the bathroom. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. While I was explaining the situation to the operator, I went back into the kids' room. Another flash of lightning flashed across the sky, and I could see the man was now gone from the tree. 2 police cars arrived on the scene. Even in the torrential downpour, they searched the entire property for the man, something that I was eternally grateful for. And after 20 minutes of the officers searching the outside of the house, they came back inside, soaked. The lead officer said they didn't find anyone, but they did find something. On the tree directly outside the children's bedroom, they discovered marks and broken branches, indicating that there was indeed someone in the tree. They also found a rope and duct tape. That part still haunts me. The police were amazing though, because they offered to have an officer stationed outside the house the rest of the night, just to make sure that we were all safe. When everything calmed and settled down, I apologized profusely to Corey and Chelsea for not believing them. They forgave me and told me that they were glad that I was their babysitter. Thankfully, nothing like this has happened to me since. I still babysit occasionally when I need the cash, but now, if a kid tells me there's a boogeyman outside their window, I believe them. Stay safe.